The first time humanity was invited to compete in the sovereign convergence, Earth thought it was a prank. The message arrived simultaneously in every language, on every frequency, in every orbiting satellite. It shimmered across screens from New York to New Delhi, from the deserts of the Sahara to the frozen silence of Antarctica. It was brief and maddeningly polite. The galaxy extends its welcome. Send one champion. 1,000 prizes await. Choose wisely. The signature beneath it pulsed with symbols no human linguist could decipher, yet somehow every person who saw it understood the intent. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a trick. It was an invitation. Within days, telescopes confirmed what the message implied. A vessel the size of a continent had anchored itself in the dark beyond the moon's orbit, vast, faceted, gleaming like a crown carved from starlight. They called it the diadem. Governments argued. Scientists panicked. Conspiracy theorists celebrated. But the diadem remained silent except for one additional transmission, coordinates for a rendezvous point in orbit, and a single condition. One champion only. The selection process nearly tore the planet apart. They debated soldiers, scientists, diplomats, billionaires. In the end, the choice came from an unexpected direction. His name was Cale Arden. He wasn't a general or a politician. He was a salvage pilot. Cale had spent most of his life combing the orbital graveyards around Earth, guiding small craft through fields of defunct satellites and shattered stations. He had a reputation for calm under pressure and for bringing back things no one else could retrieve. He'd once navigated a storm of solar debris that tore 3 other ships apart. When asked why he should represent humanity in a galactic contest of unknown rules, he'd shrugged. "I'm good at surviving," he said, "and I don't scare easy." It turned out the galaxy valued both. The diadem's interior defied physics. Cale's shuttle was swallowed by an iris of light, and suddenly he stood in a hall vast enough to contain mountain ranges. Gravity felt Earth normal. Air was breathable. The ceiling shimmered with distant constellations, real ones, he suspected, projected from thousands of light years away. He wasn't alone. Representatives from species he could barely comprehend filled the terraces around him. Some were crystalline lattices that chimed as they moved. Others were liquid forms contained within hovering fields. There were towering avian beings draped in metallic plumage, insectoid diplomats with eyes like polished obsidian, beings of living flame that flickered in controlled columns. And then there was her. She stood at the center of the hall on a raised platform of translucent stone. She looked almost human, tall, luminous skin faintly opalescent, hair like a cascade of silver threads that seemed to float even in still air. Her eyes were a shade of violet, so deep they seemed to hold entire nebulae within them. A crown of delicate crystal circled her brow. A voice resonated through Cale's mind rather than his ears. Is her radiance, Princess Erin of the Elthery Dominion. The Elthery. He didn't know the name, but every other being in the chamber reacted. Some bowed. Others folded limbs in gestures of respect. The air itself seemed to hum with deference. Erin's gaze swept across the assembly and finally settled on Cale. For a moment, the immensity of it all, the distance from home, the impossible architecture, the silent attention of civilizations older than Earth, pressed against his chest. He straightened. Princess Erin spoke, and though her lips moved, the words resonated in every mind present. The sovereign convergence convenes once every 10 millennia. The galaxy offers 1,000 prizes to those who prove worthy. Knowledge beyond comprehension. Technologies that bend stars. Sovereignty over unclaimed systems. The rewriting of physical law in limited measure. 1,000 prizes. The terraces stirred with anticipation. Kale felt his pulse quicken. For the first time, Aaron continued, a new species joins us. Humanity of soul. 1,000 eyes turned toward him. Your champion will compete as any other. If he triumphs, he may claim one prize.
One.
The word struck him like a stone. Just one. Aaron's eyes remained on him, unreadable. Let the trials begin. The first trial was not physical. Kale found himself standing in a space of pure white. Across from him materialized a being of fractal geometry, shifting angles and light. Trial of mind, it announced. Questions came in waves. Problems that spanned astrophysics and moral philosophy. Simulations that required predicting the collapse of stars, the evolution of ecosystems, the consequences of choices that rippled across millennia. Kale wasn't the smartest person on Earth. He knew that. But he was adaptable. When faced with a problem he couldn't fully understand, he broke it down.
He focused on what he did know.
He remembered the hours spent recalculating trajectories in unstable orbits, making decisions with incomplete data and seconds to spare. He didn't try to outthink the galaxy. He tried to survive it. When the white space dissolved, he was back in the Great Hall. Several competitors were gone. Eliminated. Erin inclined her head slightly toward him. Impressive, she said quietly, her voice now audible in the air rather than in his mind. Didn't feel impressive, he replied. Her lips curved faintly. That is often the mark of it. The second trial was one of endurance. They were dropped figuratively and literally onto a constructed world. A sphere of wilderness orbiting a blue giant star, its surface a chaotic mix of jungles, oceans, volcanic fields, and razor-edged mountains. The rules were simple. Last one standing. Kale landed in a dense forest where the trees pulsed faintly with bioluminescence. The air was thick and humid. He could sense other competitors scattered across the world. The avian warrior from earlier soared overhead, wings cutting through alien skies. In the distance, a crystalline entity refracted sunlight into searing beams that carved swathes through foliage. Kale had no superhuman abilities. No claws. No energy shields. Just a standard-issue survival kit provided by the Convergence and his own ingenuity. He avoided direct confrontation whenever possible. He set traps. He used terrain. He observed. When a massive quadrupedal being with chitinous armor charged through the undergrowth toward him, Kale lured it toward a volcanic fissure he'd mapped earlier. He triggered a small landslide, sending both of them sliding toward molten rock. At the last second, he anchored himself with a grappling line. The creature did not. He didn't celebrate. He just kept moving. Days blurred into each other. The artificial sun rose and set in accelerated cycles. Competitors dwindled. On the seventh cycle, Kale found himself facing the avian warrior on a cliff overlooking a storm-tossed sea. The alien's metallic feathers crackled with stored energy. Its beak opened in what might have been a challenge. Kale's body ached. His supplies were nearly gone. "You don't have to do this," he called out, unsure if it understood him. The avian lunged. The fight was brutal and brief. Kale took a glancing blow that tore through his shoulder. He responded by diving low, grabbing the alien's wing joint, and hurling both of them toward the cliff's edge. At the last instant, he let go. The avian's wings were damaged from the struggle. It tried to stabilize. It failed. Kale lay on the cliff, staring at the alien sky, breathing in ragged pulls. When the world dissolved around him, he didn't resist. Back in the hall, only 3 competitors remained. The third trial was choice. Kale stood before a vast display of light. 1,000 shimmering orbs hovered in an arc around him. Each represented a prize. A voice filled the chamber. The finalists may now claim their reward. Choose one. The other two competitors stepped forward first. One selected an orb that flared into a star map, uncharted systems granted to its species. The second chose a sphere that unfolded into a cascade of equations, knowledge of faster-than-light manipulation beyond current galactic limits. Then it was Kale's turn. The orbs pulsed, beckoning. As he approached, information flooded his mind with each one he neared. Cures for every known human disease. Energy sources that would eliminate scarcity forever. Terraforming technology capable of turning Mars into a paradise within years. Defensive arrays that could shield Earth from any conceivable threat. He felt dizzy. Any one of these would change humanity's fate. Choose, the voice urged. He hesitated. And then he noticed something strange. Near the edge of the arc, almost overlooked, hovered an orb unlike the others. It glowed more softly, its light steady rather than dazzling. He stepped closer. Instead of knowledge or power, he felt a presence.
Warm.
Lonely. Familiar. He turned slowly. Princess Erin stood at the periphery of the hall, watching him with an expression he couldn't decipher. "What is this?" he asked. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Erin descended from her platform, each step measured. "That," she said, her voice quiet but carrying, "is not a technology, nor a territory, nor a law of physics." "Then what is it?" She met his gaze directly. "It is me." Silence fell so complete that even the hum of the diadem seemed to cease. "The convergence binds my people," Erin continued. "Once every 10 millennia, the heir to the Elthary must offer themselves as a prize. It is a covenant older than most civilizations present. To ensure neutrality. To prevent tyranny."
Kale's throat went dry.
"If claimed, I would belong politically and personally to the victor. An alliance embodied." He stared at the orb again. "You're saying I can choose you?" "Yes. And if I don't, then I remain unclaimed," she said. "Until the next convergence. 10,000 years." There was something in her eyes now. Not fear. Not quite hope. Resignation. Around them, ancient beings watched with detached curiosity. To them, this was tradition. Ritual. Politics on a cosmic scale. Kale's mind raced. He saw Earth's crowded cities. The children playing in dusty streets. The scientists dreaming of cures. The engineers struggling to stretch dwindling resources. He saw the 1,000 prizes again. He could save billions. Transform his species. Usher in a golden age. All he had to do was walk past her. "Why does this exist?" he asked quietly. "Because power corrupts," Erin said. "Because my people were once conquerors. This covenant forces us into vulnerability. Forces us to remember that even we are not beyond consequence." "And you," he pressed. "Do you want this?" A flicker crossed her face, so brief he almost missed it. "I want," she said carefully, "to choose for myself. But that has never been the way." The galaxy offered 1,000 prizes. He looked at her, at the loneliness hidden beneath centuries of ritual, at the weight of expectation she carried. He thought of Earth, of how humanity had clawed its way from caves to orbit not because it was the strongest, but because it refused to accept inevitability. Maybe the greatest gift wasn't power. Maybe it was change. He reached out. His hand passed through the soft light of the orb and closed around Erin's. "I choose her." The chamber erupted. Shockwaves of emotion rippled through telepathic species. Metallic wings clashed. Crystalline forms chimed discordantly. The voice of the convergence boomed. Choice recorded. "The human champion claims Princess Erin of the Elthary Dominion." The orb dissolved. Erin's hand was warm and solid in his. The Covenant shattered like glass. The aftermath was immediate. Elthari elders manifested in columns of light, their forms vast and terrible. "This is unprecedented," one thundered. "A primitive species claiming our air." "By the rules," another countered coldly. "It is valid." Kale stood his ground, though every instinct screamed at him to step back. "You don't get to treat her like a trophy," he said. "Not anymore." Gasps rippled through the hall. Erin tightened her grip on his hand. "By claiming me," she said, her voice now resonating with authority that dwarfed even the elders, "the human champion invokes the full rights of alliance. I am not property. I am sovereign. And as sovereign, I declare the covenant fulfilled and concluded." The diadem itself seemed to hesitate. Then the voice of the Convergence spoke once more. Covenant parameters met. Heir claimed. Binding complete. The Elthari are released from compulsory offering. 10,000 years of tradition ended in a single sentence. The elders recoiled, their light flickering with outrage, and something else. Relief. The galaxy had expected humanity to grasp for power. Instead, it had chosen a person. And in doing so, it had altered the balance of civilizations. Earth did not understand at first. When Kale returned, not alone, the reaction was chaos. The Elthari flagship that accompanied them dwarfed any human construction. It settled into orbit peacefully, its presence both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Global broadcasts carried Erin's image to billions. She stood beside Kale in the United Nations General Assembly, her luminous form serene amid the storm of flashing cameras. "I was once a prize," she said, her voice translated flawlessly into every language. "Now I stand as an ally. Not because your champion sought advantage, but because he chose differently." She extended a hand toward Earth. "The Elthari offer partnership. Knowledge shared, not bestowed. Technology developed together, not imposed. We will not solve your problems for you, but we will walk beside you as you do." It wasn't the 1,000 prizes. It was something else. Respect. The changes were gradual, not miraculous. Human scientists collaborated with Elthari scholars. Medical breakthroughs came not as gifts but as joint discoveries. Energy systems evolved through shared research. Humanity grew stronger, not dependent. And Kale? He found himself in a role he'd never imagined. Not a king. Not a ruler. A bridge. He and Erin spent long nights speaking beneath simulated stars aboard the Elthari vessel. She told him of her people's long history, their mistakes, their regrets. He told her about Earth's oceans, about rainstorms in summer, about the way children laughed in crowded markets. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked him once. "The other prizes?" He considered the question seriously. Sometimes he thought of the instant cures, the instant abundance, the ease with which suffering might have been erased. But then he looked at her. "At the Convergence," he said, "everyone else chose something they could use. I chose someone who could choose back." Her eyes shimmered. "You changed my people," she said softly. "You changed mine," he replied. Years later, when the next sovereign convergence cycle approached its midpoint and other civilizations began preparing for the distant future gathering, the story of the human who chose the princess had already become legend. Not because he gained power, but because he refused it. The galaxy had offered 1,000 prizes. He chose the one that could stand beside him rather than beneath him. And in doing so, he proved something no trial had measured, that sometimes the greatest victory is not in what you take, but in what you set free. The first cracks did not appear in the stars. They appeared in the silence between them. 3 months after the convergence, long after the headlines stopped screaming and Earth's governments settled into uneasy cooperation with the Elthari Dominion, the galaxy began to react. not violently,
Cautiously.
civilizations that had never questioned the Convergence's rituals now found themselves confronting an uncomfortable truth. A young species had not only participated, it had rewritten tradition. And tradition in a galaxy as old as this one was power. The gathering of the elders. Deep within the L3 core worlds, systems so ancient their suns had been stabilized artificially for millions of years, the High Conclave convened. Kale was not meant to attend. But Aaron insisted. If we are to build something new, she told the elders, it cannot begin with exclusion. The conclave chamber was a sphere suspended within a star's magnetosphere. Plasma flowed around transparent shielding in brilliant rivers of gold and violet. L3 elders manifested as towering columns of light, their consciousnesses intertwined in shimmering lattices. Kale stood at Aaron's side, painfully aware of his smallness. One elder's voice resonated like a distant supernova. You have ended a covenant older than the extinction of 1,000 species. Another followed, colder. You risk destabilizing the balance the Convergence maintains. Aaron did not bow. The balance maintained obedience, she replied, not justice. The chamber brightened with agitation. Kale stepped forward before fear could silence him. With respect, he said, forcing his voice steady, you bound your heirs to prove humility. But humility that's forced isn't humility. It's punishment. Several elders flared in disapproval. You speak boldly for one whose species has barely left its cradle. Kale met the blazing presence, without lowering his gaze. Maybe that's why I can see it, he said. You created the Convergence to stop yourselves from becoming tyrants again. But somewhere along the way, the ritual became more important than the lesson. Silence fell. Not empty silence. Thinking silence. Aaron reached for his hand, not for support, but in solidarity. I do not reject our history, she said softly. I reject the belief that we must forever pay for it in the same way. One elder dimmed slightly. And what would you replace it with, Air? Choice, she answered. The galaxy watches. Word of the conclave spread far beyond L3 space. The crystalline Ketheri collective began re-evaluating its own millennia-old subjugation treaties. The avian Saren hegemony opened diplomatic channels with former rivals. Even the warlike Dravari clans, who had never won a convergence, sent observers to Earth. Humanity had done something unprecedented. Not by conquering. Not by outwitting. But by reframing what victory meant. The fracture. Not all welcomed the change. A coalition of minor powers, species that had relied on convergence prizes to leapfrog technological development, saw danger in this shift. If the ritual weakened, so did their opportunity to gain advantage. And advantage, in the void between stars, meant survival. A fleet emerged near the outer L3 border. Not an invasion. A message. Restore the covenant, the transmission demanded, or we will ensure no species benefits from its dissolution. It was the first true test of the new alliance. Earth panicked. Human military leaders convened emergency sessions. Defensive satellites were activated. For the first time, humanity faced not a theoretical alien threat, but a real one. Kale stood in Earth's Orbital Defense Command Center, watching holographic projections of hostile vessels gather like storm clouds. He felt the weight of his choice pressing on him. Had he doomed his world? Aaron stood beside him, luminous and calm. We do not answer fear with submission, she said quietly, nor with annihilation. You think they'll listen?
Kale asked.
She tilted her head slightly. No, she admitted, but others will. The Stand. The L3 did not deploy their ancient war fleets. Instead, they transmitted a declaration across every known channel. The convergence would continue. The prizes would remain. But no sentient being would ever again be offered as one. The covenant was replaced with a charter of mutual accountability. Species powerful enough to host the convergence would submit to independent oversight by a council of lesser civilizations. It was radical, dangerous, and humiliating for those who preferred the old hierarchies. The hostile coalition advanced anyway. Their ships crossed into contested space. Human sensors tracked weapons charging. Kale felt the old survival instinct ignite in him, the same instinct that had guided him through orbital debris fields and volcanic jungles. "Open a channel," he said. Military officers hesitated. Aaron nodded. The channel opened. The leader of the coalition appeared, an insectoid form with segmented armor and eyes like black mirrors. "You destabilize order," it hissed. "We will not allow chaos." Kale leaned forward. "Order built on coercion isn't order," he replied. "It's fear with better branding." The alien's mandibles clicked sharply. "You are naive." "Maybe," Kale said, "but we're not alone." As if summoned by his words, dozens, then hundreds, of new signals lit up the tactical display. Ships. Signatures from across the galaxy. The Ketheri Collective. The Tsaran Hegemony. Independent systems that had never dared oppose convergence tradition. They were not there to fight. They were there to witness. To stand between. Aaron's voice carried across the channel. "You threaten war to preserve a ritual that has already ended. If you fire, you declare not defense of balance, but fear of equality." The coalition hesitated. Their advantage evaporated in the presence of so many observers. War thrived in shadows, not under universal scrutiny. One by one, their weapons powered down. Their fleet withdrew. The quiet victory. There was no triumphant explosion. No dramatic final battle. Just a slow dispersal of ships and a galaxy exhaling. On Earth, celebrations erupted, not in reckless euphoria, but in profound relief. Humanity had not been forced into dependency. It had not been crushed. It had stood. Months later, Kale and Aaron stood on a balcony overlooking the Indian Ocean at sunset. The sky burned orange and violet, colors that reminded Aaron faintly of her home star's magnetosphere. Waves crashed below in endless rhythm. "You could have had so much more," she said softly. He smiled. "Like what?" "Instant solutions. A golden age overnight." Kale watched a fishing boat move across the horizon. "If we'd taken that," he said, "we wouldn't have earned it. We'd just be caretakers of someone else's miracle." She considered that. "And instead," he replied, turning to her, "we build something together. Slower. Harder. Ours." Aaron stepped closer. "When the next convergence comes," she said, "they will speak of this cycle as the turning." "Is that good?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "It means the galaxy learned." 10 years later, a decade passed. Earth's cities shimmered with hybrid architecture, human steel and glass interwoven with ethery crystalline structures that harmonized with sunlight. Energy grids ran cleaner, not because they were gifted, but because collaboration accelerated discovery. A new generation grew up knowing alien allies not as conquerors or myths, but as neighbors. The convergence itself evolved. The 1,000 prizes remained, but the definition of worthiness broadened. Cooperative achievements began to outweigh competitive dominance. Some species resisted. Change never moved uniformly, but it moved.
Kale aged.
He returned off into space, not as a competitor, but as an ambassador. He visited worlds that once viewed humanity as insignificant. On each one, the story followed him. The human who chose the princess. He corrected them when he could. "I chose a partner," he would say. The final reflection on the 20th anniversary of the convergence, Kale stood once more aboard the Diadem. It had returned to Earth orbit, not as an intimidating monolith, but as a symbol. Aaron stood beside him in the vast hall where it had all begun. The terraces were filled again, but this time humanity was not alone or uncertain. They were part of the tapestry. "Do you ever think," Aaron asked quietly, "about what would have happened if you'd chosen differently?" He looked out at the assembled civilizations, at the diversity, the fragile cooperation, the living proof that the galaxy could evolve. "Sometimes," he admitted. And he turned to her, eyes steady. "I think we would have gained everything," he said, "and lost something we didn't even know we needed." Her violet eyes shimmered. "And what was that?" He squeezed her hand gently. "The chance to change the rules." The convergence voice echoed once more through the chamber, marking the ceremonial closing of that era. "The galaxy offered 1,000 prizes," it intoned. "One choice reshaped them all." Kale did not feel like a hero. He felt like a man who, in a single impossible moment, had trusted his instincts. He had stood before unimaginable power and chosen not control, not advantage, not supremacy, but connection. The galaxy had offered him dominion over stars, cures for suffering, the rewriting of natural law. He chose the alien princess. And in doing so, he did not just win a prize. He freed one. He freed a civilization from ritual bondage. He freed humanity from dependency. And perhaps, in some quiet, immeasurable way, he freed the galaxy from itself.